Hello, everybody. This is Catholic Dad episode number 235, The Aristocracy of Bureaucracy. What do I mean by this? And so, as you build a bigger bureaucratic system, and last video we talked about the nobody tyrant, the bureaucratic system in America, that it's growing, and the whole West is it's essentially taken over by this nobody tyranny. That it's such a huge bureaucracy that nobody knows how the system works. People sit at desks and they tell you what to do, and they don't even know why they're telling you what to do. But just because they've been told that's what you should do, they just repeat the words to you and they tell you that's the way it has to be. And that's a bureaucracy for you. It's completely unresponsive to the present day. It just creates rules, and it creates layers and layers of rules to try to get people to perform in certain ways which really make no sense, and it's not responsive to the people. It's not responsible to the people it serves. It's just responsible to the people that create the bureaucracy. And that's why it's a tyranny, by the way, because it essentially enslaves you to a system of what people want, and that's the bureaucratic model. Anyway, what is the aristocracy of bureaucracy? Well, so I'm a physician, and I'm not a typical physician because I don't have the typical history of a physician. Most physicians, their parents tell them when they're 2 years old or when they're in the crib, they say, you're going to be a surgeon, or you're going to be, you're going to be this, you're going to be that. And they're told their entire lives that that's what they're going to do, and that's what their main profession in life should be. And I don't want to say all physicians, but a lot of them do that. But most physicians have the inkling of an idea by 9th grade, 10th grade, that they want to be physicians. And so, anyway, when did I decide I want to become a physician? I was in I was in my junior year in college. I was studying for an organic chemistry test, and somebody said to me, you're one of those pre-medders, aren't you? And I said, no, I'm not, actually. I'm going to be a petroleum engineer. And they said, really? Like, why do you take all these pre-med courses? And I said, well, I'm a chemistry minor, math minor, geology major. And then they said, well, why don't you just take the MCAT, see how you do? And I said, really? Well, can I do that? And they said, yeah. And so I actually talked to a pre-med advisor the next day. And he said, yeah, you could definitely be pre-med. Just sign up for the MCATs and see how you do. And I did, actually. And then suddenly, within 6 months, I was in med school, and I don't even know how I got there. I know over winter break that year, I essentially did 2 hours of shadowing time. So I only had 2 hours of shadowing experience in my entire pre-medical career, meaning I sat in an internal medicine office for 2 hours and saw people come in and heard about their hypertension and their diabetes or whatever it was, and I learned absolutely nothing. It didn't inspire me to be a physician. But nonetheless, that was all my pre-med activity. And, and in fact, I took an EMT course after my junior year in college, right before I got into med school. And I didn't ever practice as an EMT, but at least I got to learn the words and put on bandages and stuff like that. But nonetheless, so most kids, and by the way, back then that was good enough to get into med school. You didn't really need shadowing experience. You didn't need volunteering experience. You didn't need life crisis. What you needed to do was get good grades in college, and you also needed to do well in the MCATs, and you had to interview well. That was all. And if you could do that, you can get into med school, and that's what I did. The funny part was we had 15 kids in my college that were pre-med, and I was the first one in med school out of all of them, and they were all designing their med school application from day one in college. And so they were kind of a little bit annoyed about it, but that was okay. I was happy to get into med school. Everybody else eventually got into med school as well out of all those pre-medders. But nonetheless, so nowadays, the med school process is more bureaucratic than it used to be. There's more hoops you have to jump through, more barriers in your way. There's more things you have to do on the application process. It's not take the required classes, try hard, do well, and do well on the test. Nowadays, you actually have to have shadowing experience with a physician. I'd say 40 hours or something like that. You have to have lots and lots and lots of hours of volunteer service, and so on and so forth, like things you never had to do before. If that were the case, I would have had to take a whole year off to prepare for med school, and I didn't have to do that. I actually got to just do it on my own. But nonetheless, my dad was a ghetto cop. My mom was a single mom of 3. She was a waitress and a secretary. And I was working a lot of hours in college, and I was also working a lot of hours on my summers. I never had any free time because I was kind of paying my way through college. I didn't have the financial capacity to do volunteer hours. I didn't have the financial capacity to do all the shadowing hours. I didn't know any physicians that I could really shadow. I would have to cold call a bunch of physicians. And so all these shadowing experiences and volunteering experiences and all the other stuff that they make med students do now, this is stuff of the rich. Like people who come from humble beginnings, not that I came from majorly humble beginnings, but I certainly had to work my way through. We can't do that because we have to pay our own way and we had to pay our own bills. But kids that have lots of money from mom and dad, they don't have to work, and therefore they have a lot of free time to do volunteer hours and shadowing experience and extra research and all the other stuff. And so therefore all these requirements, these bureaucratic edicts and dictates that don't make you a better physician, they don't make you a better candidate, they don't do anything other than see if you're willing to jump through a hoop for the academic process. What they do is they weed out good, honest kids that come from the lower middle class. And they essentially pick kids that come from the upper middle class, whose kids or whose parents are already physicians or lawyers or so on and so forth, whose physicians are or whose parents are of means. And this creates an aristocracy system, like it's the aristocracy of bureaucracy, that if you have means, then you're more likely to play the game and get into the process. Whereas before, when I did it, you didn't have to have means to get into med school. You didn't actually have to come from money to get into med school. You just had to try damn hard. But nowadays, they've made it where you actually have to have means to partake in the process. And if you don't, they tell you to take a year off, and volunteer for a year, or take a year off. Well, that's kind of snobbery, if you ask me, that you can actually tell a kid from lower middle class you have to give another year of your life to the process to get to the place, even though you've done well in classes and done well on a test. The aristocracy of bureaucracy, just think about it for a second. The more rules and regulation that the government pops up around you, it kind of cuts out the lower middle class and the people that are trying to climb the ladder. It creates an aristocracy system that favors those who have, those who are well connected, those who know the system, those who are well advised, and those who are not are cut out of the system. It creates a class system of medical school. It creates a class system of whatever system becomes more bureaucratic. And so this is Catholic Dad making you think about it. Please like or subscribe, get the Mass, and pray the Daily Rosary. God bless you all.